Hi everyone, my name is Sylvana and I'm a digital project lead for DSM-Firmenich. Next to that, I'm also the product owner of Signal's notebook for my unit. But as you can see from my picture, that's not how I started. So over a decade ago, I started with former DSM on the lab, performing amazing analytics for the different projects. I found that amazing. But during the process, I also learned that I like talking with my colleagues about how to make life on the lab easier. Not only for myself, for my lab, but also for labs in general. So at one point, I was asked to join a project team called Signal's Notebook. And that is what brings me here today. But before I like to take you along my journey, let me say a few words about the company. So as you can see, DSM-Firmenich is active in 4 segments: perfumery and beauty, taste, texture and health, health, nutrition and care, but also animal nutrition and health. Because let's face it, who doesn't like to smell nice? I know I do. Who doesn't like to eat nice tasting food, which is also nutritious and also produced in a way that's also good for our lovely animals, right? But the company did not start out that way. In fact, it was previously 2 different companies. Whereas Firmenich started, I think, by a scientist in his own garage, developing products for fragrances and flavors, leading towards becoming, I think, the world leader in this segment. But DSM started as the Dutch state mines, moving away from coal to specialty chemicals, to materials, and finally to biotech. As you all know, these 2 companies merged in May, and during the last couple of years in the former DSM, we did our implementation journey for Signal's Notebook. Unfortunately, our implementation initially was not that successful. This is because of several different reasons. One is the high project complexity. As you know, in any global company, you have different units, different groups, different wishes, therefore different requirements. Next to that, Signals is also a product with many different features. So combining these 2, you have different user requirements for each feature. I'd like to make an analogy. Have you ever made dinner reservations for a large group of your friends and family? I know I had. So personally, I like Italian food. I can eat pasta any day of the week. But my dad doesn't. So we have to compromise. Okay, what type of restaurant do we go to? That's the first compromise. Secondly, how late should the dinner reservation be? Dutch people typically like to eat around 6. Some people don't, right? So it's a constant concession. In the end, you'll make it, but the process is not always fun. And the project approach that was initially used was a waterfall one. Typically, this is a linear approach. So you do development, more development, maybe a little bit more development, and then you have a final product. For us, with our different units, that meant easily, I think, Doris, 8 work streams. And for each work stream, easily multiple workshops needed to get the user requirements clear and specific. User requirements that were on average good enough for implementation, but too average to be successful. So in the end, we did the development, and the development, more development, and this was not an approach that we liked. Nobody wanted this. We had a product that was not fit for purpose, and that led to a lack of trust and motivation and ownership. Nobody wanted to touch this project anymore. But I hear you thinking, how did we turn this around? How did we turn this frown upside down? We did this with an agile approach. And I'll explain to you in a bit what that meant for us. But we defined upfront what are the things that we really want during this project phase. So we wanted a system that was global. So having a common core that each unit that wants to join our signals party will adhere to. So a set play field with rules, but also give each unit the opportunity to pull in their specific requirements. So what is important for your lab and being able to bring that into the product. So a global system, but a local implementation. And in order to do that, you need to have ownership that is close to your community, close to the users. And for that, the product owner, which is depicted on the slide, is an important aspect. Like Doris sometimes mentions, you want to see the pain in the people's eyes. So invite them, bring them in to be a part of the solution. Make them work together with you. And in our case, that meant that the project said, hey, we'll pay for the development, the design, and the implementation, but will not pay for the resources. So you provide someone that will help in actively developing the solution with you. And of course, for us, it was very important to measure the success, to be in touch with our community, to keep very close eye on what do they want, and to track that. And this we did via dashboarding. So I assume some of you know what the agile way of working is, but I'll explain to you anyway. So the product owner I mentioned before is a very important person. He or she is responsible for their unit. But that person doesn't do it alone. That person will be tasked in setting up a project team. Project teams that represent the labs where the implementation is needed. So in my case, that meant I was representing my analytical lab. But Henry was representing the application lab. And someone else was representing the DSP lab, and so forth. That team will then bring in their wishes, their ideas, their requirements for their unit, for their labs. And the role of the product owner needs to make sure that those ideas then are translated into stories. Stories that are then put on a backlog and prioritized. So what are the stories that we want to do first? And typically, the product owner pulls these stories in what we call a sprint planning. And a sprint typically takes 1 to 4 weeks. And in our case, our cycle was 3 weeks. And during these 3 weeks, the configurations were done, tested, and at the end evaluated. And that last part of the process is a very important one. So when do we consider something done and achieved? Because in the Agile Scrum way of working, you work towards a working product and not a perfect product. Because nothing is really perfect, right? And in practice, that meant for us that we had dedicated workshops in the sprints. So we did our homework up front, but most of the things we did in the sprint. And here the product owner was mandated to make decisions based on the input from the team. And we only needed a global product owner in case we could not sort anything out. But mostly the product owner and the teams could manage themselves. And then after these 3 weeks, we start the cycle again. So are there new wishes? Put them into user stories. These are prioritized yet again, and then the cycle continues. And in order to make sure you don't over-prioritize or over-iterate, we make sure that we had fixed sprints during the development. So after a limited amount of sprint, we had a working product. So this way of working was also reflected in how we set up the project. So as you can see from the chart, we first started with our technical delivery. So working on this global common core that everybody else will need to join and adhere to. And at one point, the first unit started design and implementation. In this case, led by Lisa, and I was part of her team. I was a configuration manager in her team, representing my lab. And at one point, the second unit wanted to join. They were not forced to join. So we had also a second product owner. The product owner driving the sprints for their unit, from design until implementation. And then at one point, we had a third unit that wanted to join. And this third unit even wanted to join in a validated way. So adding another layer of complexity. And we did that. And now we are onboarding the fourth and final unit of our company. So almost every unit is now working with Signals Notebook. So at the end, we now have 4 product owners, working closely together with the same common goal, servicing our own community, making sure that we deliver a product that works. The product should work for us. We don't work for the product, right? And after the go live of our units in, April 21, the other units started going live as well. And at one point, it was not a project anymore, but a product. So we entered into what we call maintenance mode. So the Scrum Master left because we had the information on how to do this process ourselves. This meant that we implemented what we call a lead PO. So every quarter, another product owner leads the sessions, drives the meetings, drives the retros, which we still do to this day. And what helped me transition from a configuration manager into a product owner is that there was a process in place for what a PO does. And there are steps in the process that I can explain to you after the session, if for those who are interested. But that helped me move away from being part of the team in prioritizing for my lab. So I'd like to take a few minutes on reflecting on the experience of the process. So for me, Agile was new, and the Scrum framework. So we just had to trust that this would work. Now for me as a researcher on the lab, having trust in the process, I don't know, I wanted to have the data, right? Data for decision making. But we just went with the flow. And at one point we were sharing our ideas. These ideas were translated into stories. And that gave us the confidence, like, hey, our voices from the lab are being heard. And seeing these stories being pulled into a sprint planning, having it put into the product via the design and via the configurations, we also felt that we had influence on the decision making. Of course, the product owner prioritized, but it's based on our input, based on our wishes. And then we saw the product grow, because we saw something came to life. From text into a Jira story, to a process, to a template, to a workflow. And we also saw the product team grow. We became a quite knit team, and we had a lot of fun doing that. And this increased the trust, and the cycle continued. So we were more open in sharing our ideas, but also sharing what did not work. So if we implemented a feature in sprint 3, and I thought in sprint 5, I don't know guys, I would like to change this, it was possible. We saw the product also grow, but we saw the community adopt it. So this graph shows the amount of entities that were created after the implementation for my unit. So that also gave us the idea, people are using it, because if they are not, that's also a clear signal, right? Okay, now we have what we thought a nice product, but how to make sure that the user community adopts it? because that's a big challenge. So we went for the train-the-trainer model. So Mark Abea, our Revity Signals development consultant, trained the product owner, but most importantly, the configuration managers in our own developed system at the end. So the configuration managers know the workflows, know the templates. They know now how to improve, how to maintain, and how to add new things if needed. And these are the people that are also the champions for the product, champions for their labs. So when they did the training, I was part of that process. The people from the lab could also recognize, hey, this is a person it's coming from my lab world, that's been part of the process, so our needs should have been considered. And I know I did, I think, 8 rounds of trainings with my training partner, Henry, and we recorded all these sessions. I think in the end we trained over 250 to 300 users, and I know Henry and myself did 100. And saying that these trainings were recorded, these are now part of the official training materials for new employees. So when a new employee starts, they will see me and Henry rambling on Signals Notebook. So that will be my legacy when I leave this earth. Next to that, during the training, after implementation, we did pulse checks. So we sent out surveys, we went to speak to the people individually, we went to their work group meetings, just to ask, were the trainings okay? Were they too long? Can you now do what you want to do? And also, are you missing out? Is there anything that you'd like to see differently? Because that's important. And we also did not want to just chuck a piece of software over the edge. We wanted to make sure that this would be a product that would still be active years after, which is the case. So we have a change management process in place. So if one of our colleagues on the lab say, hey, I'd like to have things changed, the configuration managers know what to do. They'll create a user story. I'll prioritize that for my unit and implement it if we can. Amazing. So we did a successful implementation of Signals Notebook for our unit, but also for the 3 other units. And the final unit that is now onboarded, I also expect will go very well. So I'd like to zoom in a little bit on this. We have a fit-for-purpose product. So this is a snapshot of several test experiments in the sandbox with objects that were requested by the community. So very specific to us. And we have a team and a process in place to maintain this, to change this. Also, the feedback that we got showed us that we're on the right track. People were happy with the training. They liked what they see. And also after chatting with them in a more, let's say, personal setting where they could really share their opinion, because in a group setting you don't always get the honest opinion, right? They were quite happy. So summarizing the main success factors. Having good ownership. So having someone from the unit actively participating in driving the change. Having a global system with local implementation. Having a global system in place also means easier maintenance, because everybody knows and does the same, but have your own local templates. We did it in an agile way. So room for improvement, room to go back, as long as you just move forward. And also tracking how the community feels. So keep being engaged. So at the moment we don't send out surveys, but we just talk to people. And what's better than talking, right? So concluding that Signals Notebook is now heavily used in our science and research labs. We're building out further with integration with databases, because that's something scientists love, databases and dashboarding, which we're also using the Spotfire functionality for. Lastly, we also achieved an integration with LabTrain, what I'd like to call our series on the lab. So wrapping things up, and for me to take a breath, I feel very proud that I'm able to share with you guys our story, but also a little bit my personal story. I was able to represent my analytical lab, also the labs in general for my unit, and use this as a stepping stone to move away from doing the actual work, but still making life on the lab easier. And the reason that I'm still the product owner is because I get to work with a great set of people I can do all the talking with, the laughing, and we all want the same. Serve our community, our users, so that our researchers can be as lazy as possible. Right? So at the end, what I'd like you to take away is, if you want to do this, build a good team. They will be the champions for the implementation. And just have a lot of fun doing it. So thank you for your time and attention. And if there are questions.